Hey everybody, welcome back. I have been looking forward to making this video for a very long time. This video is going to be a tutorial about how to put a hidden PUL layer into a cloth pad that you are sewing. And one of the things that was really important to me is that I be able to put a lot of information into this video, as well as just the mechanics of how we do this on the sewing machine. Because when people come into sewing cloth pads, the concept of putting in the PUL layer, especially, you know, with all the terminology out there, like the hidden PUL it gets a little intimidating. And I wanted to kind of demystify the whole thing for you. And I wanted to talk to you about what a walking foot is, which is a presser foot attachment for your sewing machine that works really well with slippery fabrics like PUL. And so I have recorded this over and over and over. I've got like 2.5 hours collective, and I'm just going to toss it all and start over. As you know, I tend to babble, and I'm going to try to keep that to a bare minimum in this video and see if we can't keep it under a half an hour. I'm crossing my fingers. So I'm just going to go from clip to clip and try to keep this as short and Amy-free as possible for you, because I really want this information to be out there for you, because I know there's a lot of you who really want it. So wish me luck. We'll see how it goes. Let's get into it. So the first thing we need to talk about is, what is PUL or PUL? PUL or PUL is polyurethane laminate, and this fabric, this rustly fabric, is PUL. It is polyurethane laminate. It was developed for the medical industry because, you know, there's all kinds of needs in medicine for a fabric that is breathable and that can be against people's skin, but that will prevent leakage of any kind of fluid, liquid, body fluids, all of that stuff. And so that's what this fabric was made for. And then of course it got picked up by diaper making companies, and then as it became more widely available, individuals started purchasing it to make cloth diapers. And then of course it has been appropriated for making all kinds of things, from wet bags and cosmetic bags to of course cloth menstrual pads, which is what I'm going to be showing you how to use PUL for. PUL is a very thin fabric. I don't know if you can see that, but I mean, it's really thin. It's not much thicker than regular cotton fabric. But the way this is constructed is you have this laminated polyurethane coating on one side, which is this shiny stuff, and it's very slippery. And then on the other side, you have this 100% polyester fabric liner. So it's nice. Now, you can use PUL as just the back on your pad, and you don't need anything else but the PUL. And I will briefly mention that when I'm doing the sewing, to show you how you would change my process to just use this for the backer. However, I prefer to use a hidden PUL layer, and there are two reasons for that. Number one, I don't like this rustly sound. To me, it sounds like, you know, thighs rubbing together while you're wearing pantyhose or nylons, and I just don't care for that particular sound. However, it's very soft, it's certainly unobtrusive, and nobody would hear it but you, and you probably wouldn't even hear it at all if it were a pad just sitting inside your underwear. I don't think that's a problem. That's my personal neuroses, so get over it. See, the babbling, I told you I would do that. Okay, then the second reason that I hide my PUL is because I had experience with one PUL backed pad, and it slid around on me. And that happens for some people, and it's largely to do with underwear choice. I like the underwear that I wear, and so I'm not going to change my style of underwear simply to accommodate the pad. I just put a fleece or a flannel backer, which you'll see in the tutorial. So I hide my PUL layer, and then that was no longer an issue for me. So that's why I hide it. You don't have to hide it if you don't want to, and I'll discuss both of those processes in the tutorial. So that's PUL. The next thing I want to talk to you about is a walking foot. This is a walking foot. My monitor's doing all kinds of weird lighting things. I'm sorry for that. So I'll go back and forth from being really pale like a sick person to kind of pink to kind of yellow. Go with it. This is a walking foot. And again, this is where I really lament the poor quality of my camera. I don't know why it has so much trouble showing you detailed things, so I don't have hope that you're going to see all of this. But I'm going to explain to you what this is, and then in the tutorial video, I think that you'll be able to see how it functions. I'm going to do maybe a little clip or something with this. I'm going to do the majority of my tutorial with a regular presser foot. And the reason I'm going to do that is because there are quite a few of you who don't have a walking foot, or who cannot or will choose not to purchase one. before you get into making a pad. But you need to know what this guy is. On your sewing machine, on the little plate that, where your fabric advances underneath the needle, there are these little metal teeth that come up out of the bottom of that plate. I'm sure you've seen them if you've ever used a sewing machine. Those are called feed dogs. I don't know why they call them dogs, but they're called feed dogs. Like, bark, bark, canine dogs, like Cadence. Feed dogs. And they advance the fabric from underneath. They come up underneath the fabric, bump it up, and push it forward. Okay. Now, when you're doing anything that is a slippery or stretchy fabric, or when you're doing anything that's in layers, simple physics means that the layers of fabric, if you have this one underneath, is being bumped forward by those feed dogs, but this one isn't. This one's probably, simple physics, it's going to go forward faster than this one. And that's why we have to pin so much. That's why we have to be so careful about clipping, and you have to stop and readjust all the time to make sure that your layers aren't sliding apart from one another. Well, with a walking foot, they're all clunky like this, but they do look different from one another. So the one for your machine might be different than this one. It's going to be really difficult for you to see this, and I do apologize. I wish I had a better camera. This little white plastic square here, and this white plastic rectangle, and that white plastic rectangle there, they all have feed dogs on them. And this sits down. This is the part that presses down. Pretend my hand is fabric. This sits down on the fabric, and these feed dogs go from the top. So there are feed dogs on the bottom from the machine, and then the feed dogs from the top on the walking foot, working in unison to advance the top layer and the bottom layer at the same rate together. And it works miracles for helping you keep everything together. You don't have to pin as much, and there's just not as much friction in opposite directions between the layers of fabric. So a walking foot can really make this process easier for you, especially with fabrics like PUL that tend to slide around, with stretchy fabrics like cotton knit jersey, like t-shirt fabric. It can make your life really much easier. In addition to which, because cloth pads are a unit that has multiple layers, these can be just a miracle for your sewing. They can make things so much easier. And so I strongly recommend that if you have the means that you get one of these. And unless this gets really ridiculously long, I will try to show you a walking foot in action a little bit so that you can see kind of how it works better and more up close with the camera that I use downstairs, which is just my phone. Which, how sad is that? My phone has better resolution than the camera on my computer. Babbling again, I'm sorry. Okay, and the final thing that I really need to touch on before we start the tutorial process itself is you don't need PUL, strictly speaking, in a menstrual pad. If it's going to give you confidence, if it's going to make you feel better, go ahead, get some PUL and put it in your pads. When I first started doing this, that was the notion that I came into cloth with, because I had had so many leaking issues for years with every kind of disposable that I used. I used tampons and pads in tandem with one another, and I still leaked all the time. And it was one of those, if you can relate to this, where you had to put a pad down underneath you on your bed, and you had to wear the super absorbency, and then you had to wear the long pad. I've always had to do that, and I would still, almost every night, I would have issues. And so when I came into cloth, I was like, these are not going to be adequate. So I was adamant from day one that there had to be a waterproof layer in my pads. And I was mistaken about that, as I have now been doing this for a little while. And I've tried pads from lots of different people made with lots of different materials. I have come to find that I just don't have cloth pads that leaking is an issue. They are more than adequate. And they absorb better. I've had a much better experience, and I just don't have to deal with leaking on the scale that I did with disposables at all. And most of my pads don't have PUL layers in them anymore because I don't use it, because I found that I don't need it. However, if you use your pads for moderate incontinence, or if you use your pads and you just feel like you need that waterproof layer in there for confidence, by all means, that's what PUL is here for. And I'm going to show you how to do that. The other thing that I wanted to touch on, which is kind of related, is that when I first started doing this, I didn't know what PUL was, but I knew I wanted a waterproof layer. I learned pretty quickly. But my first set of pads was made with a crib liner that I had in the house. And this goes into a question that we get all the time is like, well, I can't find PUL, or I don't want to order PUL on the internet, but I found this product at my fabric store. Can I use this instead? We get asked about the plastic laminated tablecloths. We get asked about old raincoats, shower curtains, pretty much anything people run across that has a plastic layer of some sort in it. And they say, can we use this instead of PUL? Well, the answer to that question is, I mean, strictly speaking, yes, you can use those things. They're not going to be as breathable. They're going to be much thicker. They're going to make the pad a little bit sweaty. If you're prone to that sort of thing, which I happen to be, and I don't like it. So pretty much all of those things out there, there's a reason they developed this fabric. It's because it's superior to all of those other things out there. And then there's also the question of one of the reasons we switch from cloth pads, when we switch to cloth pads from disposables, is there's a lot of stuff in plastics that aren't good for us, not next to a mucous membrane, which is what the inner folds of your labia and your vaginal canal are. You don't necessarily want to have those things right up next to your skin. They cause problems. So I'm not saying that any of those plastic things do. I don't know what every plastic fabric out there is made from, but I do know that this one is not as bad for you. This one was designed to be worn next to skin. This one was designed for the things that we use it for. So go with PUL if at all possible. But if you don't have PUL, you can't afford PUL, and you really need a waterproof layer, yes, you can make those other things work. And you would put those into your pads the same way I'm going to show you how to use this. Okay? So I think we can go downstairs and sew now. If we keep going, and the next clip is the sewing machine, you'll know I didn't think of anything else. Otherwise, you'll see my face again, babbling some more. All right, let's get into it. We made it. Okay, so what we have here is all of the little pieces that I'm going to use to make the pad. This is the PUL layer, and you're going to cut it out with the same pattern that you use for your topper and your backer. It's going to be really squishy. You're going to notice that it has the slippery side there, and then the polyester side that we talked about on the other side. Before I come back on this video, I'm going to take the different core pieces of fabric and I'm going to sew them together as I did in my first sewing tutorial into one piece, and then I'm going to put them onto the topper and secure them to the topper with the stitch that I always use. And when I have done that, I'm going to come back. So get to that point if you wanted to sew along with me to where your core is attached to your topper. Okay, so this is the part where I get to talk to you about how you're going to assemble your pad sandwich for sewing. All right, now you've taken your topper and you've got your core attached to it, and now I'm going to show you, we're going to pretend it's all sewn together so I can show you what the pad sandwich will look like when it's all sewn together. You're going to have your fleece backer on the bottom. And then you're going to have, when we're all finished, the PUL is going to be on the inside. So we're going to have the PUL sat down with the polyester side down towards the underwear. And you're going to have the shiny side of the PUL layer facing up towards the body. And then you're going to have your topper and your core on top of the whole thing. So that's what it's going to look like when it's done. So the important thing to remember is that the shiny side of the PUL faces up always towards the body, and the polyester side faces down towards the fleece backer. And then the fleece backer is, of course, on the bottom. Now, if you wanted just a plain PUL backer, this is what you would do. Same deal. You want the shiny side facing inside the pad and the polyester side facing outside of the pad. And so if you wanted just a PUL backer with no fleece, that's how you would sew it. Now, we're going to make this pad for sewing. So I'm going to show you how to assemble it for sewing it together, because we're going to do a turn and top stitch, which means that basically we're going to sew the pad inside out, and then we will turn it right side out and then top stitch it. You want right sides facing. So the side of the fleece that you want to be on the outside of the pad should face the side of the topper that you want to be on the outside of the pad. So the pretty sides facing, if that makes sense. Because then when we turn it in right side out, then those are going to be the pieces that are facing. Now, Then we have to figure out where we want to put the PUL layer, and that's where it gets a little bit more difficult. Now I'm doing this as a voiceover, and I'm not really sure what I was trying to talk to you about there. I'm trying to remember, but I'm not sure. But anyway, the key point is right sides facing, just like in the previous video when we didn't have a PUL layer. And you want to line these up, your topper and your backer, the same way you would if there was going to be no PUL layer. And I had a little trouble with this. This topper fabric was very sticky, basically. When it touched the fleece, it didn't want to slide around. So when I wanted to reposition it, I had to pick up the whole topper and move it again. All right. I will manage it here in a moment. All right, now the PUL layer is going to be inside, so it's going to go on the outside of the sewing sandwich. If that doesn't make sense to you spatially yet, just stick with me. You'll see it when we get going. You want the shiny side of the PUL facing out and the polyester side facing the backer. And this is because you are now looking at the bottom of the pad. When we turn it inside out, that shiny side is going to be touching the core on the other side, and the fleece is going to be on the outside of the pad. So to sandwich this, you want the fleece and the topper facing pretty sides together, and then you want the PUL added to the back with the shiny side out. And then we're going to pin it all together, trying to keep the shape lined up as reasonably as possible. And as per usual, I start my pinning process right there where my turn space is going to be. So I always put my first pin where I think I'm going to start sewing. And here in a minute I'm going to speed the video up so you don't have to sit and painstakingly watch me pin. But I'm going to put these first couple pins in, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the different qualities of PUL. A lot of people are very adamant that you shouldn't pierce the PUL layer any more than possible, or any more than necessary, I apologize. So I'm going to demonstrate with these. They're called clover clips, and a lot of people use these. These are just little clips designed to hold layers together for sewing. You can also use regular old binder clips, like office supply binder clips, the little black things with the silver tabbies on them. Those work very well, and before I got myself a set of clover clips, I used binder clips. I have found that it really doesn't interfere with the functionality of a pad to pin, but if you want to be, a perfectionist about this, using these clips is an excellent way to go. So I wanted to show you that you have that option as well, and a lot of the really purist PUL sewers, they use those. And so now we're going to go through a really fast clip of me pinning this together. You want to use more pins than usual because PUL is very slidey, and you want to make sure that the PUL layer doesn't move while you're sewing. Especially if you're not using a walking foot, you're going to need to have this really secured very well so that the PUL doesn't move around. Okay, so now we've got it all done and ready to go. We're going to sew. First, I want to take a second to talk to you about needles because it was specifically requested that I mention needles. Again, with PUL, you want to use a different kind of needle, and it's called a ballpoint needle. And these needles they have a blunt tip as opposed to, it'll still go through your finger. So, for us, it's still sharp, but technically speaking, it has a blunt tip on the needle as opposed to a sharp tip. And what that does is it separates the fabric as opposed to poking through and perhaps ripping fibers or slicing fibers. I'm not a purist about this. I use a standard needle on my machine. I used to follow all the instructions and use the ballpoint needles, but I don't anymore. I just use the regular sharps, and it has not been a problem for me. However, if you want to do things properly, you're meant to use a ballpoint needle. They're also really good for stretchy fabrics like jersey knit and things of that nature. Okay. And as to sizes on needles, you'll have to consult someone who's more experienced with sewing than I am. Honestly, I don't know the difference. So I just use a standard sharp needle for this. And here we go. It's going to speed it up so you don't have to watch the whole tedious process. If you want a non-sped up total video tutorial about how to sew a pad together, my other video, how to sew a cloth pad, is available on the channel too. And you can watch that, and I go slower and explain everything I'm doing. And here you're just going to sew this, and again, remember that PUL layer is on the bottom with the shiny side down towards the feed dogs on your machine. And we're just going to go around this whole pad with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like you would if there were no PUL layer. The importance of this, and the only thing it changes, is that it is an extra added layer in your sewing. And it is a very slippery layer added to your sewing. So go slow, readjust you know, however often you need to make sure that you are catching that PUL layer all the way around the shape and that everything stays lined up. Isn't watching me so fun? Let's see, what else should I talk to you about while we're waiting for me to get around this shape? I don't know. It's pretty self-explanatory at this point, isn't it? All right, we get around to the end of this corner, you back stitch, and now we're ready to clip. And I skipped something in the last video that I really needed to show you, and so I'm going to show you my clipped pad again in this one. This is the pad after I've clipped everything. You want to clip your corners and your curves. And you clip all of your curves, you cut out little notches because that makes it easier for the curve to fold in on itself without extra bulk, keeping the curve from being straight and flat. You want to clip out all of your internal corners, and all of your external corners you want to clip in the fashion I'm demonstrating there with my fingers. You go up to the stitch line, but do not clip over your stitches or you'll have a hole in your pad and it'll be useless. There you go. So that's clipping. And you need to do that before you turn your pad. Now I'm going to show you here. You're going to turn this the same way. You basically ignore the PUL layer, okay? You're going to turn just as you would if there were no PUL layer, flipping the topper and the backer right side out. The PUL layer is going to be manipulated down inside the pad. So don't put your fingers between the backer and the PUL layer to fold it, to turn it right side out. Same way as usual. Put your fingers between the topper and the backer layer, and that's how you're going to turn it inside out. And I'm not going to make you sit and struggle with me through this. We'll come back after I've got it turned. Okay, so here's your pad turned right side out. And you'll see that the topper is right on top of the PUL layer with the shiny side facing the topper and the polyester side facing the backer. And here's how we're going to close up this turn space. Put your finger in, and pressing the PUL and the fleece together, the backer, push those down, get them nice and nested together and lined up where they would meet the seam straight. And then you'll find, as usual, that your topper fabric just automatically wants to lay down flat in line where it should be. And then you pin it. I always use 2 pins on this section. And then the pad's going to be ready to top stitch. Okay, so we'll come back after the pad has been top stitched, and I just use a 1/4 inch top stitch all the way around. And the key is to make sure that you grab that fabric and make sure that all 3 layers get covered when you go over that turn space with your machine. Like so. You just run your finger along there and make sure that all of those fabric pieces have been grabbed by your seam so that the pad doesn't open back up there and cause you problems. So there you go. There is our PUL layer pad. This sucker is waterproof, and you'd be surprised how waterproof it really is. But you won't hear anything, you won't feel anything. It's going to feel just like every other pad. That's why I like Hidden PUL. Okay, I hope that was helpful. I hope that gave you enough of a picture of how you do this, and enough of my babbling information about what all the pieces are and what your options are. I'm going to do a separate video about how to use a walking foot, because it has other applications than just this, and I think the video is long enough as it is without me giving you another demonstration of a walking foot. We'll do that in a separate video. And then the last thing I wanted to address, you'll notice that I made my PUL layer what we call wing to wing, meaning that it's over the entire base of the pad. We used the topper backer pattern, not the core pattern. Now, there are a lot of people who, in order to save PUL and use less of it, they will put their PUL layer simply on the core, and that's an option for you. The reason I don't do that is because whereas it may stop straight, leaks if you just, you bleed through the core, it'll stop it that way, but it doesn't stop any leaking from compression. So as soon as you sit down on that pad, if you've oversaturated your core absorbent material, as soon as you sit down, it's all going to come out the sides and leak through. So that's why I don't particularly like that. Now, it does give you an added measure of leak protection, and I'm sure it would be adequate. Like I said, I don't put PUL in my pads anymore at all, but that's mostly because now I don't worry about oversaturating my pads. That's just not something that would happen with the ones that I have and the way that I use them. So that is a consideration. You are more than welcome to just take the PUL layer and use it in your core to attach to your topper instead of putting it wing to wing like I did. But if you are really truly concerned about, if you're doing this because you are worried about leaking, then go ahead and put it wing to wing like I showed in the video, because that's going to give you really the closest thing to 100% waterproof protection. The only way that that pad's going to leak when you have a wing-to-wing PUL layer is if you literally saturate the pad so badly that it leaks over the sides. And I think you would know before that happened that you needed to change your pad now. I don't think that that's something that's ever going to happen in a sudden rush unless you need to be in an emergency room. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, if there's any part of this that was unclear, or if there's anything that I left out, please let me know in the comments and we can revisit this, or I can do it again. Like I said, I recorded this video so many times, so I'm not really confident that I've done a great job just because I've done it so many times and been unhappy with what I ended up with, or how long it got, or what have you. So if this video left anything out or you have questions, please let me know, because I'm more than happy to come back and try again with you. Okay? Thanks so much for watching and supporting the channel. Happy sewing. Let me know how it goes, and I will see you again soon. Bye.